I first heard about the house in Shaker Heights on a cold October night in 2007. I was a young journalist then, hungry for stories that could make headlines, and a colleague whispered about a suicide house where no tenant ever lasted more than a year. Every family that moved in either fled in terror or ended up dead. Curiosity is a dangerous thing. I told myself I'd only visit once, write an article, and move on. But from the very first moment I set foot on the cracked driveway of 4266 Ashbourne Road, something gripped me. A suffocating heaviness, like the air itself didn't want me there. The house wasn't like the others on the block. Most were bright, suburban, well-kept. This one sagged under years of silence. Its windows seemed darker than glass should allow, reflecting nothing, as if the house didn't want to give back what it saw. Inside, the smell hit me first. Damp wood, rust, and something faintly metallic, like dried blood. My flashlight beam cut through the dust, revealing furniture left behind by previous owners. An overturned chair, a broken mirror, a child's shoe lying in the middle of the hallway, untouched by time. I started recording notes on my handheld recorder. The Shaker Heights house, abandoned since 1982. Residents reported strange noises, shadows, and something moved. I froze. My flashlight swept across the living room, catching the edge of a curtain swaying. The window was shut tight. Then I saw it. For the briefest moment, in the corner of the room where the light barely reached, there was a shadow darker than the dark itself. It wasn't cast by anything. It was standing, waiting. The shape was wrong for a man. Too thin, too tall. Its head tilted at an unnatural angle, as if listening. My breath hitched. When I blinked, it was gone. I told myself it was exhaustion, maybe my mind playing tricks. I kept moving deeper into the house. The hallway stretched longer than it should have, like the walls had shifted. Every step I took, the wooden floor groaned, not just beneath me but behind me, as if someone else was matching my pace. Halfway down the hall, I noticed frames hanging crookedly on the wall. Family portraits, faces blurred by mold and water damage. Except one, a photograph of a family of 4, clear as if it had been taken yesterday. A father, mother, and 2 young children. None of them smiled. Their eyes were glassy, lifeless. The strangest part? The father's hand rested on his son's shoulder, but in the reflection of the glass there was a 5th figure standing among them. My stomach dropped. The recorder in my hand crackled. A voice whispered through it. Low, raspy, words I couldn't make out at first. I raised it closer to my ear. "Don't stay." I stumbled back. The recorder wasn't even switched on. My flashlight flickered. The air turned bitter cold. I heard movement upstairs, footsteps, slow and deliberate. Against my better judgment, I climbed. Each step screamed under my weight. At the top, the hallway was darker, colder. Doors lined the corridor, but one stood open, the master bedroom. I stepped inside. The room was empty, except for a bed frame and a cracked dresser. But on the wall, carved into the plaster with something sharp, were words, "We see you." I staggered back, heart pounding. The flashlight beam landed on the dresser mirror, and I saw myself. Except it wasn't me. The reflection's eyes were black. Its mouth stretched into a wide, unnatural grin, and behind it in the mirror, the shadow loomed, draped over my shoulders like it was already claiming me. The light went out. The last thing I heard in that pitch-black room was the whisper again, but clearer this time, right against my ear. "You've already moved in?" When I bolted out of that room, my body was drenched in cold sweat, my heart pounding so violently that I thought it might burst. But the stairs behind me seemed to stretch farther away, the more I tried to reach them, as if the house itself was pulling me deeper in. Every step echoed unnaturally, the sound bouncing back like someone else was chasing me. Finally, I stumbled into the living room again. The front door was right there, wide open, waiting for me. I didn't remember leaving it open. My gut screamed to run, but something kept me frozen. My flashlight flickered back on, and that's when I saw it. The family portrait, the one with the fifth figure, was gone from the wall. In its place was a fresh photograph, the frame spotless, as if newly hung. My hands trembled as I brought the beam closer. It was me. I was standing in the same hallway I was in now, my recorder in hand, looking pale and terrified. And just like before, behind me loomed the shadow, its hand resting on my shoulder like I belonged to it. I staggered back, nearly dropping the light. My throat went dry. That picture hadn't been there before. Someone, or something, wanted me to see it. The next day, shaken and desperate for answers, I went digging through the local archives at Shaker Heights Library. Most people avoided talking about the house. The librarian hesitated when I mentioned the address. Finally, she slid a thin, yellowed folder across the desk. "Don't take it with you," she whispered, "and don't stay there after dark." Inside were brittle newspaper clippings, each one more disturbing than the last. 1974. The first owner, Richard Hanley, was found dead in the basement. Official cause, suicide by hanging. But neighbors swore they had seen him alive after the police had removed his body, staring at them through the upstairs window. 1979. The Peterson family moved in. Within 6 months, their youngest daughter vanished without a trace. The police searched every inch of the house. They never found her. Her mother later insisted she still heard the girl calling from inside the walls. 1982. The last family, the Harrisons, were found dead at the dining table. All four seated neatly, hands folded, eyes gouged out. No signs of forced entry. After that, no one stayed longer than a week. Tenants complained of waking up with bruises shaped like hands on their necks, of mirrors showing things that weren't there, of whispers that followed them even outside the house. The most chilling piece of the file was a black and white photograph taken by a police officer after the Harrisons' deaths. The image showed the dining table, the bodies sitting stiff and lifeless. But in the background mirror, behind the family, stood the same towering shadow I had seen, its head tilted, listening. That night, against every instinct, I returned. Something about the case clawed at me. I couldn't stop. The house greeted me with silence, but it felt heavier, hungrier. I set my recorder on the dusty coffee table and began speaking, trying to stay steady. Night 2, Shaker Heights house, documenting history of... The recorder clicked on by itself, my voice distorted, repeating in a static loop. "You've already moved in, already moved in, already moved in." I snatched it up, shaking when I noticed something else. A trail of wet footprints had appeared on the floor, leading from the kitchen to the basement door. They weren't mine. They were too large, too long, as if made by something not entirely human. The basement door creaked open, slow and deliberate, though no one touched it. From below came a faint sound, not footsteps, not whispers. It was the sound of a child crying. Every muscle in my body screamed to leave, but some dreadful pull dragged me forward. I descended, each step colder, until the beam of my flashlight cut into the basement gloom. At first, all I saw were stone walls, old tools, and broken furniture. Then, tucked against the far wall, my light caught something that froze me in place. Scratches. Thousands of scratches covering the bricks. Tiny fingernail marks, layered over decades, like someone, or many, had clawed at the walls trying to get out. Among them, carved deep into the stone, were words, "He feeds." My light faltered, and then I realized the crying had stopped. Something was breathing in the dark. The breathing grew louder, deeper, rattling as though lungs too large for a human chest were dragging air in and out. My flashlight flickered once, twice, then steadied. The beam swept across the basement and landed on something I'll never forget. In the far corner, crouched low to the ground, was a figure. Its limbs were impossibly long, bent wrong, its head tilted at an angle that no neck should bear. But the face, God, the face, looked like a hollow version of mine. Empty sockets where eyes should be, a mouth stretched in an unnatural grin as if mocking me. It didn't move. It only breathed. And then slowly, It lifted one long arm and pointed at the wall behind me. I turned, against every ounce of my will. The bricks were no longer just scratched. They were shifting, bulging, as if something was pressing from the other side. Small, pale fingers began to slip through the cracks, child-sized fingers. Then an entire hand, slick and trembling, clawed into the basement air. A girl's voice, fragile and broken, whispered from the wall. "Help me, please. He won't let me go." My stomach lurched. The missing child, the Peterson girl, she was still here. I staggered forward, wanting to pull her free, but before I could, the shadowed figure in the corner rose to its full height. It was enormous, its head brushing the ceiling, its form unraveling like smoke but solid enough to block the exit. Its hollow voice rasped through the room. "She is mine, and now, so are you." The girl's hand was yanked back into the wall with a shriek. The bricks sealed shut as though they had never been disturbed. Panic surged through me. I bolted up the stairs, taking them 3 at a time, the house shaking with every step as if it were alive, furious that I dared to run. Doors slammed shut around me. Pictures rattled and fell, the glass shattering into reflections of that same smiling, eyeless face. I crashed into the living room, lungs burning. The front door loomed ahead, but it wasn't open anymore. It was bricked over, seamless, as though the house itself had erased my way out. My recorder, still on the table, clicked again. A voice played back, not mine this time. "You never came here to investigate. You came home." The floor beneath me trembled. Dark cracks spread across the wood, oozing with thick black liquid. A hand, long, skeletal, dripping, shot up from the crack and wrapped around my ankle. I kicked, screamed, clawed, but more hands burst through, dozens of them, pulling, dragging me down. The last thing I saw before the floor swallowed me was the family portrait hanging neatly on the wall again. Only this time it wasn't the Harrisons. It was me. Me, sitting at the dining table, my eyes gouged out, hands folded neatly in my lap. And behind me, the towering black shadow, smiling. Some say the house still stands in Shaker Heights, abandoned but never truly empty. Neighbors claim to hear voices when the wind is still, a man's screams echoing under the floorboards. And at night, if you look through the dusty window, you might see a new photograph on the wall. A photograph of whoever was foolish enough to enter last. The dim hum of the Boston subway at 2:13 a.m. was deafening in its emptiness. Jason wiped the sweat from his brow as he adjusted the flickering light above the maintenance corridor. Nights like this were supposed to be routine. Check the tracks, replace faulty wiring, make sure the cameras were functional. But tonight felt different. There was a weight in the air, a kind of silence that swallowed sound before it could reach his ears. Jason had seen shadows before. Everyone did in the tunnels, playing tricks on tired eyes. But tonight, the shadow moved with purpose. It didn't cling to walls or flicker with the lights. It walked beside him. At first, he convinced himself it was a trick of his exhaustion. A faint whisper rose above the hum of the train tracks, almost indistinguishable, but clear enough to freeze him mid-step. "You see me?" Jason spun around. Empty tracks stretched into darkness. Only the metallic echo of his boots answered him. He tried to keep walking, telling himself it was nothing. But the whisper persisted, growing slightly louder each time he passed a junction. It wasn't forming words yet, just fragmented sounds, a mockery of human speech. When he reached the main platform, he noticed the signs flickering. The digital boards were frozen on the last train schedule, lights stuttering. Jason felt a chill creeping down his spine. The shadow appeared again, not at the edge of the platform, but closer, hovering just behind him in his peripheral vision. Jason's heart raced. He reached out as if to touch the air where he thought the figure stood, and his hand met nothing. Yet a cold pressure pressed against his chest like icy fingers trying to stop his heartbeat. He tried calling out, but his voice cracked. "Hello? Who's there?" Nothing. Then the shadow's voice, sharper this time, whispered in his own voice. "I've been waiting." Jason stumbled back, fumbling for his radio. "Control, do you copy? This is Jason. Maintenance on the green line, section 12. I think I need backup." Static. Then a low, distorted breathing filled the earpiece. Not the station's control, not anyone he knew. Just a cold, guttural presence. He bolted toward the service stairs, the sound of dragging feet behind him echoing in the tunnels. Every step seemed heavier, as though the tracks themselves resisted his escape. Jason reached the stairwell and paused. The tunnel behind him stretched endlessly, yet the shadow's form was there, leaning out from the darkness, following his every move. He could feel it, not see it fully, as if it was feeding off his fear. He whispered to himself, trying to reason, "It's just a stress hallucination, just a hallucination." A door banged open somewhere down the corridor. Jason's blood ran cold. The sound came closer, faster, in sync with his panicked heartbeat. And then the shadow took a step forward, closer than physically possible, its presence pressing into the real world, touching the edges of his perception. Jason pressed himself against the wall, breath ragged, eyes wide. He could no longer tell if the shadow was moving on the tracks or inside his own mind. Then, as the last train's lights flickered into the tunnel, the shadow vanished, leaving only the echo of a whisper that followed him up the stairs and into the maintenance room. "You can't hide." Jason slammed the maintenance room door behind him, pressing his back against the cold metal. The flickering fluorescent lights did little to reassure him. Every shadow in the corner of the room seemed alive, shifting when he wasn't looking directly at it. He grabbed his flashlight, hoping the beam of light would give him some control, some clarity. But even the flashlight's circle of illumination quivered unnaturally. The shadow wasn't fully visible, yet Jason could feel it leaning, breathing, stalking the edges of his perception. "Control, can anyone hear me?" His voice trembled. Static answered, followed by that same distorted breathing. It was closer now, as though the voice had materialized right behind him, inside the room. Jason spun around, flashlight cutting through empty air. Nothing. He fumbled for the service stairs, thinking he could escape through the emergency exit to the surface streets. The stairwell was dark, suffocating. With every step he took, Jason could hear the drag of invisible feet following him. Then, a whisper, almost a hiss. "You shouldn't have come back." Panic surged. He ran faster, desperate, ignoring the warning. The stairs seemed endless. Each step brought the same chilling sensation. The pressure, the cold fingers brushing against his neck and shoulders. Jason stumbled onto the platform. The city's night air should have comforted him, but it didn't. The tunnels behind him breathed with a life of their own. The shadow moved in the corner of his vision, but when he turned his head fully, it disappeared. He saw a figure now on the opposite platform. A man, or something like a man, but it wasn't human. Its eyes were hollow voids, blacker than the night, reflecting nothing. Jason's skin crawled as it stepped forward, crossing the tracks without hesitation, moving impossibly fast. He ducked behind a pillar, heart hammering. The figure didn't appear to be constrained by the physical world. Its form flickered between solid and smoke-like, trailing darkness like it was seeping from the tunnels themselves. Jason tried calling again, voice raw. "Anyone! Police! Help!" The echo came back, but not over the radio. The shadow's voice answered in perfect mimicry of his own words. "Help! There is no help." He ran toward the station exit, every step a battle. And then he saw it, reflections in the glass doors. Not his own, but dozens of faces pressed against the other side, translucent, screaming silently. The shadows of the past victims, each face distorted in agony, eyes hollow, mouths frozen in terror. Jason froze. His own reflection moved independently, smirking, mocking him. Then he understood. The shadow didn't just follow him, it watched through him, within him, making him part of its collection. From the darkness behind, A hand, barely visible, skin pale and stretched, reached for him. It passed through his shoulder, icy cold, sending jolts through his body. He screamed, falling to the floor, flashlight clattering beside him. The shadow whispered one last time, "Stay. Forever." Jason felt his consciousness slipping, reality twisting. The air was thick with whispers, the platform stretching into endless tunnels. He realized then that the subway itself had become a cage, a living labyrinth feeding on fear, with him trapped at the center. And as the last train approached, silent, without lights, Jason understood with a terror that rooted him to the spot. The shadow wasn't just behind him, it was inside him, ready to emerge, to take him entirely into the tunnel's eternal darkness. Jason could barely move. The subway platform had transformed into a nightmarish void, stretching endlessly into darkness. The flickering lights above seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. He could hear whispers everywhere, echoing from the walls, the tracks, the shadows themselves. Each whisper carried a memory. Screams, laughter, cries, all intertwined into a suffocating cacophony. The shadow was no longer a distant entity. It had merged with the station, seeping into every crack, every surface. Jason's own reflection in the glass doors now grinned at him with malevolent intent. He realized with a rising panic that the shadow could mimic, could become anyone, anything. And it had learned him too well. A train arrived, silent, lights off, gliding in like a phantom. Jason's instinct screamed at him to run, but his legs felt rooted to the platform. The doors opened with an unnatural hiss. Inside, seats were empty, yet faces appeared pressed against the windows, faces of those who had disappeared in these tunnels before him. Their eyes were hollow, lifeless, yet fixed on him with a gaze that penetrated his soul. Something moved in the corner of his vision. A figure, indistinct, shifting. It wasn't human, but it mimicked human form. It stepped onto the platform, and Jason realized the truth. The shadow wasn't just haunting him, it was hunting him. Every scream he'd heard, every whisper, every chill had been a lure, drawing him deeper into its labyrinth. Jason tried to scream, but no sound came. The shadow's voice echoed in his mind, repeating, "You belong, you belong." Panic surged. He dove into the train, hoping for escape. But inside the train, reality bent horribly. Seats twisted, walls bled darkness, and the floor was no longer solid. The shadow's form appeared again, multiplied, surrounding him. It whispered memories that weren't his, showing him events he hadn't lived, previous victims trapped, their lives stolen, their minds added to the shadow's consciousness. Jason staggered backward, heart hammering, mind fracturing. The reflection in the window shifted into a perfect copy of himself, smiling wickedly, mocking him. Then a horrifying realization hit. He wasn't the only one inside anymore. The shadow had split him, creating duplicates of his mind, trapping them in endless iterations of fear. The train lurched forward, faster than possible, tunneling into darkness deeper than the city's mapped underground. Jason's vision blurred, and whispers grew louder, becoming deafening. Faces of the lost swirled around him, merging with the shadow, all staring, all reaching, all whispering, all hungry. Jason stumbled, feeling his body become light, almost intangible. The shadow's hand, icy and spectral, passed through him, and suddenly, he was aware of something worse than death. He was becoming part of it. His own consciousness began to unravel, merging with the darkness, as his screams echoed unheard into the void. And then silence. The next morning, the station appeared empty. The train doors opened, revealing no sign of Jason. Only the faintest flicker of a distorted reflection in the glass hinted that he had ever been there. The station's surveillance cameras captured something disturbing. A shadow moving independently of its surroundings, smiling briefly at the lens before vanishing into the tunnels. Commuters arrived later, unaware of the previous night's events. But deep within the subway's bowels, whispers persisted. Shadows moved in corners that light never touched. And if you peer into the reflection of the train windows at night, you might see a face that isn't yours, smiling back, waiting. The shadow had claimed Jason entirely, adding his fear, his memories, his soul to its collection. And somewhere, deep beneath the city, it waits for the next victim, patient, hungry, unstoppable. I never thought a single apartment could make me feel so watched. When I moved into my small Boston flat, it seemed perfect. Quiet streets, old brick buildings, and the kind of isolation every writer dreams about. But then I noticed it. The window across the hall in the apartment nobody seemed to occupy. It was always dark, and yet, sometimes just before midnight, a flicker of light would escape the blinds, like a heartbeat in the darkness. At first, I convinced myself it was a reflection from a passing car or the streetlights bouncing off a building. But then, I started seeing movement, a shadow shifting, almost human, lingering near the glass. I tried to ignore it, burying myself in my writing and scrolling Instagram to distract myself. But that was the beginning of the nightmare. My own Instagram started acting strangely. My posts, my stories, even my messages. I could swear someone or something was editing them. A caption would change when I hadn't touched it. A story would appear read even though I hadn't opened it. One night, I was drafting a story on my laptop, the soft hum of the keyboard the only company, when I noticed a DM notification. I hadn't followed anyone new, and yet, I see you. I see everything. The account had no profile picture, no posts, just that message staring at me from the screen. I froze. My heartbeat roared in my ears. It felt like the room itself was listening. Outside, I could hear the faintest scrape against the floor, like nails dragging slowly. I told myself it was the old building settling, the pipes, anything but what my gut screamed. That shadow across the hall was alive and it was aware of me. Over the next few nights, the messages continued, becoming more personal. Turn around. Look behind you. At first, I thought someone had hacked my account. But then I realized it wasn't just online. I would glance at the window and the flicker of light seemed to mimic me, echoing my movements. A ghostly presence. And I began to understand the horror. I wasn't alone. Not in the virtual world, not in my flat, not even in my own mind. It was watching me, studying me. And every night it grew bolder. It started to appear when I was on Instagram, mimicking my hand movements, or tilting its head when I tilted mine. I tried recording it, taking pictures, even calling the building manager. No one had access to that apartment. It had been vacant for years, supposedly condemned. Then one night, it did something I could not explain. I woke up to the faint glow of my laptop. My Instagram feed was open, my profile visible. I had a new follower, the apartment across the hall, and the profile picture. It was me, but not me. My own face, twisted, staring directly into the camera with shadows around the eyes that weren't mine. I slammed the laptop shut. The room went silent. Too silent. Then, from the window across the hall, the blinds shifted slowly, deliberately. The shadow leaned forward, pressing its face against the glass, and I could swear I felt its gaze pierce through me, deep into my chest, into my soul. I knew then. This wasn't just a haunting. This wasn't just a stalker. It had found a way to bridge the virtual and the real. My life, my online presence, and my home, they were all its playground. And I didn't know if I could escape. The next morning, I didn't sleep. Every shadow in my apartment felt heavier, every sound amplified. The creak of the radiator, the distant sirens, even the whisper of the wind through the cracked window. My laptop was closed, but I couldn't stop thinking about the face in the Instagram profile, the twisted version of myself. I tried to convince myself I was imagining it. Maybe exhaustion, maybe paranoia. But when I walked past the hallway mirror, I froze. There, behind my reflection, was a faint outline of someone, or something, moving in tandem with me. I spun around. Empty room. By noon, the DM notifications had multiplied. Every post, every story, every comment. You can't hide. I'm closer than you think. I know what you fear. The messages weren't just text anymore. They were alive, pulsating on the screen like a heartbeat. My phone vibrated constantly, but no calls, no emails, only messages from that account, appearing and disappearing as if breathing. I decided to leave the apartment for a few hours, desperate for sanity. Walking the streets of Boston, I tried to shake the feeling of being watched. But even outside, the feeling didn't leave. People's faces blurred, shadows stretched unnaturally, and I could swear I caught glimpses of the same dark figure reflected in store windows or in the rearview mirror of passing cars. Returning home was worse. The apartment was silent, almost peaceful, but that silence was dangerous. I entered my bedroom, and my laptop was open. On the screen, a live video feed. Not just from my webcam, but from multiple angles. My living room, my kitchen, even my bedroom. And there it was in the corner of each frame, the figure from across the hall. Watching, smiling. Panic surged. I shut the laptop and tried to pull the power cord from the wall, but it was fused. The electricity refused to die. The shadow moved closer, no longer confined to the window across the hall. Its presence pressed against me, bending reality. I could feel it in my bones, crawling over the furniture, brushing against my skin. And then came the sound. Not from the computer, not from outside, but from inside my apartment. Faint, deliberate footsteps behind me. I dared to look. Empty room. But when I turned back to my laptop, the screen flickered and displayed my own reflection again. This time, distorted, smiling a grotesque, unnatural smile. And in the reflection, I wasn't alone. A hand reached from behind my shoulder, pressing cold, invisible fingers to my neck. I stumbled backward, tripping over the edge of the carpet. My hands clawed at the air, but there was nothing to grab. Yet the pressure remained, lingering, heavy, suffocating. I screamed. The sound was swallowed by the walls, by the shadow that now seemed to occupy every corner of the room. By the next morning, I was a hollow shell of myself. The messages didn't stop. The shadow didn't leave. My own reflection mocked me, taunted me. And worst of all, I realized it had learned something terrifying. It didn't need the window anymore. It had discovered a doorway into my very perception, my digital life, and my memories. Every time I logged into Instagram, every time I glanced at my reflection, every time I closed my eyes, it was there, watching, waiting, learning. I had no plan, no allies, no safe space. And deep down, I knew the figure was preparing something that wasn't just about fear. It was about possession. I was being consumed slowly, silently, until I would no longer exist, except on the screen, where it would smile through me. I hadn't slept in 2 days. The apartment was a cage, the walls pressing in with every heartbeat. I didn't know what was real anymore. Every reflection, every shadow, every notification on my phone made my skin crawl. The figure was everywhere, yet nowhere. A presence woven into the fabric of my life. I tried to leave again, to step outside, to escape the digital trap. But the moment I crossed the threshold, my phone buzzed violently. A video call. No name, just the dark silhouette waiting. Against every instinct, I answered. The screen filled with my own face, but not my own. Eyes sunken, a smile stretched too wide, hands reaching forward as if trying to pull me through the screen. Behind me, I could see the shadow emerging from the walls, coalescing, gaining substance. I ran back inside, slamming the door, but it didn't matter. The shadow seeped under the crack, through the vents, crawling along the ceiling. The apartment had become a living thing, and I was trapped inside its heartbeat. The notifications kept coming. Stories, posts, DMs, all depicting my actions before I even made them. The figure was predicting me, controlling me. And then I saw it. A new post uploaded by the account, timestamped exactly 1 second in the future. It showed me, sitting on the couch, eyes wide, trembling. And in the corner of the screen, A shadow hand hovered, ready to strike. Panic took over. I ripped my laptop to the floor, smashing it. But the messages kept coming, not on my devices, inside my mind. Thoughts that weren't mine, whispers in my ears. You belong to me now. Smile for the world. They'll see you soon. I ran to the window hoping to escape the city, the digital web. But outside, the streets were empty, silent yet full of eyes. Windows reflected the figure, not my reflection, but its grinning, impossible face. My own image flickered and I realized I was no longer the person in the reflection. I was the shadow now. Everything went black. When the neighbors reported the apartment abandoned weeks later, investigators found a fully functional setup. Lights, devices, screens, all showing live feeds of an empty room. No trace of me. Except occasionally, in random Instagram feeds, a new account appeared. One follower, following me, following everything I had ever done. And sometimes when you open Instagram late at night, you might catch it. A familiar face in the corner of your screen, smiling that same twisted grin, watching, waiting, learning. The final post read simply, "You're next."